On February 3rd, 2020, the White House's Director of Science and Technology Policy, Kelvin Droegemeier, directed the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, or NASEM, to help determine the origins of the coronavirus. At the time, it was known that the COVID-19 pandemic had originated from a bat virus. And it was also known that the city of Wuhan, where the outbreak began, had at least 2 labs that specialized in bat virus experiments. In their response, NASEM told the White House that investigations into the virus's origins were already underway, and also that additional data was needed to determine the origin and evolution of the virus. However, as recent Freedom of Information Act emails reveal, the finalized response of the White House was very different from an earlier version, which strongly advanced a natural origins narrative. Droegemeier's February 3rd letter set off a rapid response from NASEM. By noon, Andrew Pope, a director at NASEM, had organized an in-person conference to discuss the White House's request. That conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. the same day. The NASEM meeting included a presentation from Anthony Fauci, and it also included Peter Daszak and Christian Anderson, who would soon become known for their natural origins advocacy. Early the next morning, Pope sent a draft of his initial White House response letter to 8 scientists who would later be cited as experts in the final NASEM response letter. It is not known who recommended these individuals, but almost all of them would later become directly involved with publicly pushing the natural origins narrative. In his email requesting feedback on the draft, Pope noted that plans have changed in terms of our product. Instead of responding using a based on science web posting, Pope said that he was now developing a letter that would be signed by the 3 presidents of the NASEM academies. Pope asked the 8 scientists for immediate feedback on his draft letter, which was based on the information and presentations made the day before. The draft letter appeared to accept the natural origins theory and stated that the available data was consistent with natural evolution, and also noted that there is currently no evidence that the virus was engineered to spread more quickly among humans.
6 of the 8 experts replied to Pope's request for comments. Peter Daszak, a Wuhan lab collaborator and prominent proponent of the natural origins theory, replied that it was important to look at wildlife to identify other viruses closely related to COVID-19. Christian Anderson, also a strong natural origins proponent, told Pope that the main crackpot theories going around at the moment relate to this virus being somehow engineered with intent, and that is demonstrably not the case. He said engineering can mean many things and could be done for either basic research or nefarious reasons, but the data conclusively show that neither was done. Just a few days earlier, Anderson had personally emailed Fauci, telling him privately that the virus looked engineered. The next to reply was Trevor Bedford, an associate professor at Fred Hutch, who noted that if you start weighing evidence, there's a lot to consider for both scenarios. He suggested that the letter noted that there was no evidence of genetic engineering, full stop. It's interesting to note that Bedford was responding to Pope as if he assumed that Pope had a predetermined outcome in mind. As we shall see, it's possible this particular response may have led to Pope reconsidering how much reliance he could place on the small group of scientists. Ralph Barrick, a professor at University of North Carolina, told Pope that we need to say that the closest relative to this virus, 96%, was identified from bats circulating in a cave in Yunnan, China. This makes a strong statement for animal origin. The virus Barrick was talking about did not in fact come from a cave in Yunnan. It came from the Mojiang mine, where 3 miners had died in 2012 with COVID-like symptoms. Shi Zhengli had been in possession of the miners' virus for at least 7 years, a fact that she had covered up. Crucially, Barrick was a co-author with Shizheng Li of the Wuhan Institute of Virology of a 2015 Nature paper that detailed gain-of-function experiments on coronaviruses at Xi's lab. It was this paper which set off multiple warnings about the Wuhan lab and its activities. It also appeared to have played a direct role in the formation of a secret teleconference instigated by Fauci and Farrar just days earlier. The last person to respond was Arvinda Chakravarty, whose comments differed from the other scientists in that he called for data and analysis to be shared openly. He also urged Pope not to dismiss a lab leak out of hand, specifically stating that many scientific and medical questions remain to be answered.
At this point, all the participants had provided their final feedback and were waiting for Pope to synthesize the feedback into the finalized version of the letter. Daszak apparently expected that Nasum's letter to the White House would be similar to the February 4th draft, which cited natural origins as the primary theory for the virus's origins. Daszak appeared to be so confident that Nasum would adopt the natural origins narrative that he had even begun to solicit signatures for the draft of his Lancet letter, telling potential signatories that he planned to circulate his letter to coincide with the Nasum letter, which he expected would be released the following day. Daszak's Lancet draft stated that scientific evidence overwhelmingly suggests that this virus originated in wildlife, and continued noting that this was supported by a letter from the presidents of the U.S. National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and by the scientific communities they represent. At this point in time, Daszak had only seen Nasum's draft, not the final response. Unbeknownst to Daszak, Nasum's Pope had written an entirely new response that was much more cautious in its tone, noting that additional data was needed to determine the origin of the virus. Nowhere in the finalized version of Pope's White House response was natural origins mentioned. Moreover, earlier reference to the virus being consistent with natural evolution and the statement that there was no evidence that the virus was engineered were deleted altogether. On February 6th, Nasum sent their finalized response to the White House. Shortly thereafter, ABC News published a report on White House directives to have Nasum investigate the virus's origins.